Welcome to PCB Chat, where we talk with experts across the printed circuit design, manufacturing, and electronic supply chain fields. I'm Mike Buteau, president of the PCEA. My guests today are from AllSpice. AllSpice has developed a software platform that supports users of CAD tools for collaboration, design and schematic reviews, commenting, and tracking various hardware-specific attributes such as order status, manufacturing, and connection to the PLM tools. Today, we will speak with AllSpice CEO Valentina Ratner and CTO Kyle Dumont. Thank you both for joining me on PCB Chat.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
We're going to talk about the origins and the tools of the company. I'd like to start by getting a handle on your personal backstories. I understand that you met in college, probably not that far from where I'm at, actually. Were your respective academic backgrounds in hardware or software?
Yeah, I'm happy to start off here. My background was in electrical engineering. I graduated EE from undergrad, Northeastern, also in Boston. I worked for several hardware companies in my years out of college. Both I got a mix of consumer electronics, kind of like high volume products work, and then also some industrial products, so lower volume, higher cost, higher quality assurance and things like that. So it was great to see, get experience, in both those industries out of college. I was at iRobot for a while, also in the Boston area, and left and joined a 3D printing startup where we were, of course, had to be a little bit scrappier. We got to build, the environment for EE project management from the ground up, and really through both those experiences, which I'm happy to talk more about later if we get into it, experience just how hardware collaboration could be done and how painful it was in many ways, in both experiences.
My background is in mechanical engineering, and before grad school, which is where Kyle and I met, I worked at Amazon as a PM, and I was working in large infrastructure projects. And as part of that, needed to be in many states at the same time, and kind of saw some of those pains of collaborating and with different teams, and especially in the engineering field. So that's when I got involved with internal software collaboration tools, and both saw the power that those had to make the projects better, the quality, the speed, and kind of the impact that it had. And went back to school with this very strong interest as a hardware engineer to build and develop software tools for ourselves. And that's when I met Kyle and had experienced a similar problem. So we met at Harvard in this dual degree program, doing an MBA and a master's in engineering sciences. And we both ended up focusing our MS more on the computer science side. And we launched AllSpice right after our graduation in 2020.
So you both had deep engineering experiences, both in academia at elite institutions. You worked for blue chip companies, Amazon, iRobot. I think I saw in Kyle's resume way back when there was a little bit of time at EMC as well. You're coming at this from a very well-rounded position. And so was it really when you got into the workspace that you realized, hey, look, PDFs, maybe they're a little bit of an outdated format for design reviews?
Yeah. We saw that pretty early on. And actually, I was pretty exposed to software development and firmware development, both in school and then also in my career when I graduated. I was kind of on that line of doing a bit of firmware, a bit of software, usually to help augment the hardware work I was doing. And so on one side, I started getting exposed to GitHub and to GitLab and to see some of these development tools that were evolving in that space, and to see how Git in general had really transformed that industry and built kind of this whole platform for how software engineers very quickly and dynamically kind of use this use this tool to work together, but also to very powerfully, communicate their design decisions and things like that. Never mind the whole CI/CD and automation, which it kicked off, which is a whole nother topic. And then meanwhile, giving a bit of that, and also scheduling an in-person hardware design review with PDF exports sent over email, in person 3 weeks out, to where we just kind of, brute force go through the entire design as much as we'd accumulated in the last several months. Very much waterfall focused, though. Even at iRobot, we did have this big push to move towards agile, though I don't think we fully knew what that would mean. Of course, in the startup, it was our opportunity to build it from the ground up. But that was the real, even Kickstarter for this, because just the lack of available tools for us at the startup made it incredibly difficult, even when we had, this blue ocean greenfield opportunity to build something. We still were hamstrung by the available tools. Like a lot of companies, we used GitHub at the time, but that only got us so far because it wasn't built for our tools.
So I want to talk a little bit more about Git in a moment. First, a word from today's sponsor. This podcast is brought to you by PCB East, the electronic industries conference and exhibition for the East Coast. PCB East 2023 takes place May 9 to 11 in the Boston suburbs. Visit pcbeast.com for details. You built your namesake platform, AllSpice Hub, on Git, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and Git's a distributed version control system. What about Git makes it ideal for AllSpice?
A lot of legacy tools were built on SVN or other proprietary system, SVN not being proprietary, or proprietary database systems. And part of our initial exposure was we saw that so many companies were starting to use GitHub for their hardware designs, like we did at the startup I was at. And we saw clearly there's something to this. And part of it is just there's so much support. It's become so ubiquitous in software. You can find so much capability, so much of it has been optimized. And it was kind of a perfect opportunity for us when we're laying at the technical foundation for our product. We obviously have to use this. This is where the entire industry is going. And there's so many hooks that we can plug into. Plus, every hardware company has a software company, pretty much, a software team. And those software teams are using Git. So the internal support's there, the internal tools are there. And we wanted to basically leverage that when we're building the industry for the hardware community going forward.
As you know, a lot of people, and I think I'm probably underscoring a lot here, are involved in the hardware development process. Who in that spectrum is AllSpice aimed at, and how exactly would they use your tool?
That's a great question. So we start with the electrical engineers and hardware designers and PCB designers. And we actually, when we were starting AllSpice, we mapped out like the entire stakeholder and try to figure out like kind of where we could add the most value. And what we found is those teams, electrical especially, it's been one of the least served teams across the stack in terms of the tools available, and also pretty software savvy. So a lot of electrical engineers are doing either 5% of their time, 50% of their time firmware design as well. And that's what Kyle was talking about, where kind of already know this Git workflow and they're using it for part of their time, but then they kind of switch the page to do their hardware design, and they have this completely different system based on posting notes and screenshots and pictures and email chains with 100 people. So we kind of start with the electrical engineers and kind of at the core of the PCB design. And the way they kind of use AllSpice is it's kind of a three part. It's the revision control, which is Git based. It's collaboration for running their design reviews, running their feedback sessions, and then it's automation, kind of all the way from how do you build your processes and your workflow to take away some of those day-to-day tasks that you're doing manually and put them into an API hook or a webhook or something like that kind of brings your workflow to kind of what the future looks like.
I love the fact that you're thinking in terms of the double E, right? Because what we see a lot is, the nature of ECAD is changing, and the design engineer of today has a background in double E, Whereas traditionally, they came at it from a very different standpoint. They may or may not have even had an engineering degree. It was a dedicated position as well to design circuit boards. Fast forward to today, and many of the layout people that we see have double E degrees and are really doing multiple jobs, right? So they're not just laying out circuit boards. It may be 10% of their job. And so the familiarity factor with the tools and all that really kind of comes into play. That leads me to my next question. I understand that you have some relationships or integrations with particular ECAD companies. Could you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, when we started off, the first tool we built integration for was Altium, Altium Designer, and since we've added KiCad and OrCAD support, of course we're working, we're kind of going up and down in terms of like company size and in typical profile. KiCad, of course, is very popular in hobbyists and in very small individual users and small companies. OrCAD being a little bit more popular in larger enterprise companies. So kind of trying to round out that support just on the CAD tool. And from the get-go, to Valentina's point, we wanted to build a tool for electrical engineers. I mean, I've definitely felt that EEs often get grafted onto a process that wasn't really built for them. In the past, PLM systems have kind of taken that, where it's like, oh yeah, we have this mechanical PLM system, and then also we can upload the hardware zip files or the electrical zip files there, but that doesn't really give you anything else other than just like it's a bucket for this immutable, this design to go, which is kind of the core of what you need. Don't get me wrong, but it's not really helping you do any of that collaboration, any of that automation, any of your design process. It's really just a checkbox. And so we wanted to fill in that spot. So we integrate also with the PLM tools. Our plan is not to recreate or move, build a new ECAD tool. It's not to build a new PLM tool, but there's this entire process that we found like right in between where there's nothing to help manage that ECAD workflow. And so we allow designs to be pushed to PLM, and we help with all the design management, the workflow management, automation between.
Can we talk a little bit more about what those integrations really look like? For example, in whose environment are the designs actually viewed?
Yeah, the goal we wanted from the get-go was, no exports or cumbersome PDF outputs or anything like that. So the idea that we wanted to build from the get-go was, you save the file, you commit because it's part of the Git process, and you push it because that's the other part. Commit makes a new revision in the log, and then push syncs it with the database. So the idea was save, commit, push, and then that's all you need to do to sync it with the AllSpice hub. So in terms of the integration we have, it's basically taking those native file formats and allowing them to build all of that front end rendering. So we'll visualize it, help users visualize it. We can expose data down to the object level, so users can get transistor info, resistor info, trace width, space, stuff like that. Anything you want in terms of just clicking around in the web. And then also, we get into all the collaboration features that users can do on top of that. But from the ECAD integration, it's really at the file level, much like the software industry has done.
I see. So have you done any studies or gotten any anecdotal information from customers insofar as the type of time savings that they've seen?
Yeah, we've heard that variety of different kind of the use cases. And in terms of the time savings, some of the two main ones that come up is the first one around design reviews and how it shifts from this kind of month-long process where you schedule it 2 weeks in advance, you get everyone in the room and you go through it, to now we have teams running design reviews 2 to 3 times a week, right? So it kind of breaks down this mega project that usually happens a little too late when you can't really change things anymore into more smaller and like rapid iterations for feedback. And kind of the other place where that has come up has been for a lot of the companies that we work with are growing rapidly and they're bringing in new team members and new engineers. And some of the quotes were around like, this has been the fastest bring back we've ever had, because as a new engineer joins the team, rather than having to like work on something for several weeks, is like in the morning, push the work, give some feedback, push the work again, and then we can go through that in a day. What's something that would have taken us several weeks to get someone ramp up. So that's some of like my favorite examples.
Let me ask this. in this very distributed kind of design to fabrication to assembly model that the electronics industry has adopted over the last 30 years, how does the actual application of AllSpice work? Would you have to have people at each stage have seats of AllSpice, or is it really kind of designed to be used just by a company internally that has all of that under one roof?
That was actually probably one of our biggest surprises. We originally started focused on the internal collaboration, but what we have seen is teams bringing in basically every stakeholder that's part of the process into the tool. So we have kind of two levels. We have committer sits, which are the main designers, right? Like the electrical engineers pushing, pulling files. And then we have collaborators, which are free users on our platform that will be reviewers, entering feedback, pulling files. And it's happened both actually from the internal and external perspective. From the internal perspective, people bring in their mechanical engineer counterparts to provide feedback, check enclosures, check fits, things like that. The quality teams, like compliance teams, to pull information directly. And then from the external perspective, we've seen something that happens often is people using those design reviews to collaborate with maybe a third party, a contractor, right? That's doing, maybe you aren't doing the layout in-house, maybe that's someone else like 3,000 miles away, and kind of going through those designs back and forth and collaborating with contractors all the way to CMs and vendors and manufacturers to pull the files and manage releases to say like, hey, here's the final package, here's the final version of what you need, this is what's going to get ordered. So we kind of seen, that's one of the things that people like the most at AllSpice. We intend to make it accessible, not just for the electrical engineers, but also break down a little bit of what's usually seen as a black box that people are like toss across the wall in like in a zip file, and kind of bring people into the workflow and kind of allow them to collaborate and be part of the process as things go by, rather than waiting until everything it's probably too late to change 6 months down the road.
So AllSpice is cloud-based.
That's right.
Now, is that a third-party server, or do you actually own all the servers?
Yeah, we have a couple different product tiers, since there are lots of requirements around security and regulation. Some of our customers, for instance, are under ITAR controls. So we have a couple different service tiers that we do offer. The easiest, the simplest one that I would say the largest number of our users are on is our cloud tier, and that is servers that of course we manage in the cloud. Very easy to sign up. Companies get their own partition of the server, their own space where they can basically upload all their files, so they can access it from all over the world. As Valentina mentioned, they can collaborate with other stakeholders all over the world, or as one would expect from a modern SaaS company, SaaS product. And then, of course, when we're getting into more controlled systems, we have a dedicated server offering, and this is basically, as the name would suggest, a dedicated server that we help manage for specific companies, and that oftentimes is required for instance, ITAR controlled products that need to be contained in the US. Or other countries have similar regulations, of course, and we can also do hosting in those countries.
And what about the transfer of data back and forth between the server and the your customer?
In terms of like the client integration, so because we use Git, there's a whole lot of flexibility here. There are tons of Git clients that users can use. From simple GUI-based clients, for instance, GitHub has a GUI that they offer that, of course, you can use not only with GitHub but with our tool. And there are a couple other ones that we recommend users integrate with, and that's a desktop local application that when you save your files, you can then run that commit and push process. And what's even more powerful is you can see the commit graph. You can see the changes also locally on your desktop. We have a diff tool, which basically also plugs into that system. It allows you to run that same diff that a lot of our users find a lot of value in AllSpice Hub, where we'll actually take two files or two versions of a file, and we'll automatically create red lines for them. Like green comes up with anything that's been added, red is anything removed, and yellow is modified. And we do that both at the component, the track, level, but also at the metadata level. So if you have like a new property you added to a component, we'll highlight that component yellow, but then that property will be green. And you can see both, both levels of abstraction there. So anyways, a diff tool we package up into a desktop application that you can also install. That actually we give for free on our website. So even if you're still using, the company's using GitHub to do hardware design control or GitLab or not our product, they can still install this for free, and it runs again on the desktop. So that's all available. Obviously, we hope that they kind of see the value there and the value of being able to quickly visualize these files and collaborate on these files. And that's where AllSpice Hub, which is our flagship product, comes in. But of course, that kind of demonstrates how that process works. So the local Git client that allows them to basically sync with the external server, wherever that would be.
I came into this thinking that AllSpice was probably aimed more at startups, but it sounds like you really have some established OEMs that are on board as well.
Yeah, that's a little bit of how we also started. But when we announced our product earlier this year, we started with kind of the typical team that benefit the most from AllSpice was maybe 3 to 10 electrical engineers, like mid-sized company or a mid to late stage startup. But we've actually seen incredible interest and pull from the enterprise side, which kind of speaks to this gap in the industry where not a lot has happened in terms of the tools available. Basically, your options are you either use Excel and PDF or you hire someone to build a custom system for you. And so even from the large enterprise companies, we've seen incredible pull like across industries from like automotive to consumer electronics to aerospace and anything in between.
Yeah, and because we're built on top of Git, we're not trying to replace PLM or replace an ECAD tool. It makes it really easy for small teams, even within large organizations, to adopt a tool, to set up a pilot. Of course, we get in very early and talk to IT teams to make sure that we have everything, green lights from everybody that has a that's a stakeholder in this system. But then in terms of actually, piloting or even once the pilot's complete and going into full on subscription is, we'll have 5-10 person teams within, multi-thousand person hardware teams using our product because it's just easy to integrate into the system, to use or our custom APIs if they want to hook into maybe a legacy tool that they have that they need to push data to. We really, really try to make all that happen and happen seamlessly because that's just one of the areas we've seen hardware has just struggled for so long.
Yeah, we did say ourselves we're as engineer first, so we very intentionally build a product where you didn't need the entire company to convert to be useful, right? So we always make sure the product is useful to a single engineer first, to a single team, so that even if it is like a small pocket that wants to kind of revamp their own process, you can do that. And because it is a shared infrastructure with Git, you can kind of plug in into the rest of the company and kind of take those steps forward by yourself.
Well, I'm sure it resonates with potential customers that you both have direct experience, facing these exact same problems, right? I mean, you could probably tell as many horror stories as they could about, the amount of time or the mistakes that may have been made with all the manual type of processes. In your experience, I'm sure that you've run into this as well. And just so far as sometimes the biggest hurdle is convincing somebody that they actually have the time in their schedule to, do a beta and implement this. How long does it typically take a team to get up and running on AllSpice?
I think last time we actually ran the numbers, it's about 12 to 14 minutes. So that's also another very, very intentional choice about the product. We also we know that if it takes like a 6 to 12 month implementation, it's never going to happen. And it is a big hurdle. And that's why if you are already in Git, you just clone your repo and you're up and running. And if you aren't, you can start a new repo and put your designs in. Git is so big that you could spend probably a long time kind of learning best practices and kind of going from beginner to intermediate to advanced. But in terms of like the setup itself, like for the cloud product, it's relatively it's pretty much nothing. It's like we run this 45-minute onboarding session. So by the end of it, you'll have the designs and AllSpice. You'll have your first design review run test. You have your first issues, and it almost like sounds too good to be true. And it's like, can you really actually do that? And it's like that's the question that comes up. And so the general setup, the initial setup, it's pretty fast. And I think that's one of the things that gets the team excited, which is also like you can try it with like a very low risk, right? So you can kind of give it a shot, run your first design review, see how it goes for you. And we feel very strongly about kind of giving the team's ownership on their own data, which is why it's so easy because it's all Git and it's standardized on the back end. So kind of like you control your data, you can kind of go in and go out like as quickly as you want. And we don't think it should take 12-month implementations to get a process integrated into a company. So that's where we're at.
Which is one of the benefits of just using a modern, from the CTO, I guess, toot my own horn, but like just using a modern tech stack, software stack is that, we have GitHub Authenticator. So if you already use GitHub at your company, you can authenticate with GitHub and do a migration over and you're, boom, you're all set. There's no floating license servers to manage. And we definitely try to take more, I guess, of a 21st century spin on per seat payments and stuff like that.
I've got to say that's really impressive sounding, right? I mean, in a little bit more than twice the time it would take for somebody to listen to this podcast, they could be, have AllSpice downloaded and listen to the tutorial and have it up and running. Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
About an hour. Yep. Wow. Okay. And I understand that you have some new developments that you'd like to talk about today.
One of the things that we've recently released that has been super helpful for both customers and people just interested is we released the Git for Hardware guide. There is a ton of interest from engineers just to learn kind of what does this mean, right? Like if I know Git from a software perspective, what does it mean for hardware? So we actually just released our Git for Hardware guide where it talks about the principles and some of the best practices. So if you did want to adopt this workflow and this kind of way of doing managing your process as a hardware developer, like kind of what should you do and where to get started, and some of the stories from like our experience and also from like the customers that we have in the AllSpice Hub and kind of all packaged together to kind of as an intro into the Git world for electrical engineers.
Because it's a tool. It's a powerful tool, and our goal is always to make that default setup and implementation as easy and as fast as possible. But then, the reality is that hardware teams are all different and products are different. And so being able to customize that and make that work for different companies, to enable that long tail of capabilities and kind of customizations, and the Git for Hardware guide touches on a lot of those advanced, more advanced branching structures and tagging structures and release things.
So listeners who want to learn more about AllSpice are invited to visit their website at allspice.io. This podcast has been brought to you by PCB East, the electronics industry's conference and exhibition for the East Coast, taking place May 9th to 11th in the Boston suburbs. Visit pcbeast.com for details. My thanks to today's guests, Valentina Ratner and Kyle Dumont of AllSpice. Good luck. I think what you have so far sounds great. I'm looking forward to hearing more from you in the future.
Thanks for having us.
Looking forward to seeing you at PCB East too.
Great. For PCB Chat, this is Mike Butow. Have a nice day.